Hi, I was a Perth, Australia doctor for 53 years. First of all, in hospitals, then as a family doctor, general practitioner in the suburbs, and for 5 years had my own dual diagnosis mental health and addiction clinic. And I was always interested and became more and more interested in the people who suffered the most and got the worst treatment. Where was healthcare weakest, and could I do anything to help where it was weak? All my family were farmers, and I didn't start school till I was 8 because we couldn't get to school. But at 8, I started school because army trucks were converted into school buses. Pretty primitive. And that first school only had 3 teachers. And I left school at 14 to become a farmer. But on my 15th birthday, I decided I wanted to be a doctor instead. And I tell you all this to explain why I think differently and work differently to what most people work. During and after the war in the bush, you had to be inventive. You had to make a lot of stuff, repair a lot of stuff, do a lot of stuff you normally wouldn't do, but because of wartime and post-war rationing and restrictions, we had to be original. So what I found was that the people who suffered most and got the worst treatment were people with mental health problems who became addicts and who had insufficient good friends and often had bad relationships. The most important things to have a good life are to be mentally healthy, to have enough good close relationships, no bad close relationships, and to have no addictions. This is how I see it. We all started as tiny little babies who are very helpless and very dependent. And all of us, as we grew, sometimes had distressing unmet needs and nasty experiences. And there've never been any perfect parents, and there've never been any perfect families. And if the disturbances that we had were severe or happened often, they became habits. And those habits, like anxiety, worry, fear and loneliness, depression, irritability and anger, the habits could last for years or for a lifetime. So almost everyone has some mental health problems, and I now believe that the greatest problems the world faces are mental health problems and addictions. Even what's happening in the Ukraine and in Israel now are basically mental health problems. If Putin didn't have mental health problems, there would be no war in the Ukraine. So the world's greatest need, in my opinion, for what it's worth, is a system that allows everyone to check their mental health as early as possible. I wish I'd had a system like that available to me. The system today should be fast, easy, free, something that people can do anytime online, and that everybody knows about and can do themselves. So as early as possible in life, they understand what problems they have in their mental health arising from the unmet needs and nasty experiences they had as children, when they often didn't have much control over their lives. When people reach the stage of life where they control their lives, they must know about their weaknesses. So what I saw was that there was so much mental ill health and addiction in the world excuse me, that there were never going to be enough doctors and psychologists and counselors and therapists to deal to help everyone with everything that they needed help with. And we were getting further and further behind, because there were waiting lists everywhere and there were people everywhere not getting any treatment. So things often, they sometimes get better, but they often get worse, and problems often cause other problems. Someone, for instance, has ADD, ADHD, so they get a poor education, they become a problem in the classroom. they then have unsatisfactory employment and sometimes are unemployed, and they don't have much money, and a lot of them don't get the treatment that they need because of cost and waiting lists. And one of the main features of ADD, ADHD is impulsiveness, and one day they just jump onto an addictive street drug to get relief. In 1997, I started to work 10 hours a week in an addiction clinic. And I wanted to know what caused addiction. In health, you always need to know the causes. If you don't know the causes, it's much harder to get people better, and they much more often relapse. So I went to every addiction clinic in Perth and Sydney and couldn't find a single addiction worker who could tell me what caused addiction. If I pressed them, just as likely to say, oh, they're just dickheads chasing highs. But one day in the addiction clinic I was doing 10 hours a week at, I saw 15 heroin addicts, and 5 of them had ADD, untreated, and they were in a terrible condition. And so I then started to inquire in much greater detail and with much greater care with every addict what their childhood and families were like, and how they went at school, and what's happened since. And I found that 95% of them, 19 out of 20, had had serious mental health disorders before they became addicts. The commonest was various forms of anxiety or worry, general anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive compulsive disorder, and various phobias. Depression was very common. Bipolar disorder was quite common amongst addicts. ADD, ADHD was very common, and post-traumatic stress disorder was common. Very low self-esteem was common. There was some schizophrenia and autism, and there were 2 problems that didn't seem to have a name, so I gave them a name. One was irritability, anger, rage, and violence. We're having a big epidemic of domestic violence in Australia now, and 1 woman in 4, and 1 woman every 4 days in Australia is killed by her husband or ex-husband. And I called that IAD, irritability anger disorder, and the other was PTSEF, PTS, post-traumatic evil focus, when people had terrible things happen to them, like childhood sexual abuse, or other very severe traumas. If they couldn't cope with their personal trauma, that often focus on something far away to distract themselves. They focus on the CIA or on Guantanamo Bay or conspiracy theories or the terrible things happening to women or children in some other faraway country. So what I realized was that what these people needed was dual diagnosis. Dual diagnosis is diagnosing and treating mental illnesses at the same time as treating addictions. No one else I could find was doing that, but I'm very happy to say that today, if you go online, you can find lots of centres, clinics doing dual diagnosis. But in Western Australia in the 1970s, they separated mental health care from addiction care. Back then, addiction was mainly alcoholism. And the mental health clinics had long waiting lists. That is, the free government mental health clinics had long waiting lists, and they refused to see addicts. And the addiction clinics treated the addictions, but they did nothing about mental health. I had to sit in the main addiction clinic in order to be taught how to treat addicts. And even very obvious mental health problems that had led to addictions and were perpetuating addictions were not recognised or treated in any way. In the clinic where I was working 10 hours a week, they weren't interested in the fact that mental illness had nearly always caused the addictions. They were just treating the addictions, and pretty unsuccessfully. The treatment was just one 50 milligram naltrexone tablet a day for heroin addiction, and 50 milligram naltrexone is so excessively strong that it causes many very distressing side effects, and people just won't continue to take it. So to do dual diagnosis treatment, I had to start my own addiction clinic. At that time, the epicenter of addiction or of drug dealing in Perth was the Victoria Park Railway Station, which is south of the river, and all the addiction clinics were north of the river. So I opened a clinic in Victoria Park, where it was said that there were 20 drug dealers in one street. And dual diagnosis worked magnificently. When people were treated for their mental health, it was far easier to get them off their addiction, and they were far less likely to relapse. And of course, I wasn't a mental health expert. Every family doctor had to have some basic ability to deal with mental ill health, because the free clinics had such long waiting lists, and the private clinics were expensive. The extent of my training as a medical student in mental health was 8 one-hour lectures. But I learned. I studied, I learned, and I employed a psychiatrist one day a week to work in my addiction clinic, and he treated a lot of the worst mental health problems, and I learned from him. And the main addiction clinic, public addiction clinic, 6 or 8 doctors, had an 8-week waiting list. When I was sitting in there, I saw people coming, begging to be seen and told, come back in 8 weeks, here's your appointment. And most of them had phones, but none of them had diaries, and less than half of them kept the appointment after 8 weeks. After 8 weeks, a lot of them were in hospital, in prison, or in a cemetery, or they were committing crime to pay for their heroin. So in my clinic, we saw everybody who came every day. Nobody waited even one day, except we weren't open on Sundays. We were open 6 days a week. If people wanted an appointment, we gave them an appointment. If they came without an appointment, we saw them. And what I found was that 15 minutes with someone who wants help does far more good than half an hour or 3/4 of an hour with someone who's got an appointment at a time that suits us but may not suit them, because they have such chaotic lives. They've got no money for the bus, or their kids in hospital, or they didn't wake up because they took something or other. So why was the whole mental health system and addiction system going backwards? Why were things getting worse? The longer people have to wait to get treatment, or the longer they do wait to get treatment, the worse they get. The more complications they get, the more resources they lose, perhaps lose their employment, or even lose their home, lose their family. If you see someone when a problem starts, it's far easier and quicker to help them. The cause is usually pretty obvious. There are no complications, there's just that problem. But so many people hated addiction clinics and how they were treated, that they left it as long as possible. And when you saw them with their backs to the wall with no other alternative but to come to the clinic, they had many, many problems, and it took a lot of time. So that made the waiting list longer, which made everybody else worse before they got treatment. So what I saw was that there was never going to be enough doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, counsellors, therapists to give all the help that was needed to get in front rather than getting further and further behind. And why was that? It was because the tools being used in mental health and addiction had great weaknesses. Today, almost everything is done with very good tools. I'm old enough to remember when the only two tools in the kitchen were a wood stove you had to light every morning and keep on putting pieces of wood on all day, um, and a big tin dish that you washed your dishes in. Now, how many tools are there in the kitchen? Well, there's a refrigerator, there's electricity, there's gas, there's dishwashers, there's grinders and all sorts of tools just in the kitchen, but everywhere there's tools. It's just some of the tools, like the tools where they mass produce cars, just incredibly sophisticated. But in mental health and addiction, there are only two tools, and they both had great weaknesses. The first tool is talk therapy or psychotherapy. Its first weakness is to be an effective therapist requires long training, so those therapists are hard to find and costly, and the government mental health clinics would not see addicts. And the second weakness of talk therapy is it's so slow. You need hours and hours to diagnose and explain everything to people and to educate them and train them and treat them. So most people got no psychotherapy, no talk therapy, and as far as I could see, nobody got enough. And the second tool was medicines, and medicines got a terrible conflict of interest between the people who take medicines and the people who make medicines. The people who take medicines want the medicines to work quickly, to fix them quickly, and to soon be able to stop them. The business people who make medicines want people to take as much medicine as possible for as long as possible, and preferably not to ever get off the medicines. So they make many medicines addictive. The commonest mental health issue of anxiety, I couldn't find any non-addictive calming medicines. All the calming medicines were addictive. Originally the barbiturates, and then in the 1960s Valium and Seropax and Mogadon and eventually Avanza. Avanza is such a wonderful calming medicine when you first take it, but if you take it for more than a month, you're hooked. You can't get off it. And so the medicines were addictive or not very effective, just effective enough that doctors would prescribe them and recommend them, and effective enough that people would pay for them and take them, but preferably not effective enough to get anyone well enough that they could stop taking the medicines. So what was needed, I concluded, I didn't conclude till I'd been doing parts of it for a long time, was a package of tools that people could use themselves and achieve a lot of self-help, starting early when it's far easier, to make the waiting lists at the clinic so short that people could get prompt treatment. It's so important for people to get treatment as soon as a problem starts, or as soon as they can. So what were the tools? My first tool was a 20-question checklist, which my nurse would do with the patients to save me time because I was so swamped with people wanting dual diagnosis treatment. And then in 3 minutes I could look at the results of the checklist instead of 23 or 33 minutes talking to the patient to get started. And the other tool was videos. People need to understand their problems and what causes them and what the best treatments for them are. And that takes a long time if you have to explain all that to people in consultations. And you tend to forget some things, and they don't understand some things, and by the time they walk out the door, perhaps half of it's confusion for them. But with videos, I usually went over the script 20 times before we actually filmed the videos to make sure we didn't miss out anything and to make sure everything was as clear as possible and people could watch the videos over and over again until they got them. And the initial videos were 7 to 12 minutes, and my first video 10 years ago got 10,000 viewings in 9 months, and I thought that was very good. So I did 8 more, but less and less people watched those long videos, and eventually I discovered that everybody was watching 1 minute TikTok videos, so I made 1 minute videos or under a minute videos. And to cover everything in mental health and addiction in 100 videos, you had to have a lot of videos. So I made 50 and then 10 more and 10 more and 10 more, and now I've got over 100 1-minute videos that cover most things. Every now and then I think of something else and have to do another 1 minute video. And technology advanced, and it was apparent that apps were much better than checklists. People should be able to grab their phone, go to the App Store or Google Play icon or button, press on it, and in 10 seconds download the app. And so I developed the Mental Fix-It app. The Mental Fix-It app. Bit of a strange name, but there are so many mental health apps that most names had been taken up, so we had to use a slightly strange name. So now people can go to their phone, tap on the App Store or Google Play icon or button, download the Mental Fix-It app in 10 seconds. In 10 minutes, answer 38 questions. 38 questions, that's a lot. That's going to take too long. They won't do that. No, they just have to tap one of 3 possible answers to each question. Tap, 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 and they can do the 38 questions in 10 minutes. And as they tap their choice of answers to the last question, an instant report comes up on the screen, and the instant report tells them 4 things. It tells them which 6 1-minute videos will most help their particular problems, will be most helpful for them. And they can watch those videos immediately and as often as they need to, any time of the day or the night or the week or the year. It also tells them which medicines are most likely to help them. They've still got to go and see their doctor to get a prescription, but at least they can do some research and on medicines. And it gives them a list in descending order of importance of all the problems that they've tapped, yes, moderate, or yes, severe. So they know everything. And with talk therapy, people never know everything. It's too slow. They know about the worst problems, but everybody who's got a really bad problem has got 4, 6, 8 or 10 smaller problems. And to get completely better, they need to know them all and get them all completely fixed. Might take a couple of years to do that, but that's what you want. You want to be completely healthy and well. And the fourth thing that the report gives them is a graph of their progress. Every time they do the Mental Fix It app check, which we recommend they do frequently, because every time you do it, every time you see a question, you think about it, and you see the possible answers and you decide which one, you get clearer about that problem. And that's what you need. You need to be clear about your problems. So each answer that they tap has a score. 0 for no, 4 or 6 for moderate, 10, 12 or 14 for severe. And the app adds up all the scores each time they do the app and gives them a total score. And then as they repeat it, those total scores are put into a graph. And if your treatment is right, is working, some of your severe problems will be becoming moderate and some of your moderate problems will be becoming minor, and your score should be going down. So if the total score graph in your report is going down, you're on the right treatment. If it's not going down, you have to get more or different treatment. And it's extremely beneficial to know quickly whether things are working. I mean, you know to some extent by how you feel, but this is a more exact measure. So what I'm campaigning for now, a bit ambitious for a boy from the bush, but I think everyone in the world should have access to a fast, easy, free online screening check they can do as early as possible, preferably in their teens, so that they know exactly what their mental health problems are, and they can start to fix them, and they can avoid them getting worse and worse and worse, and they can avoid complications like unemployment, poor education, divorce, addiction. Health, happiness is so important. Mental health is so important because it dominates physical health. When you're happy, that means that your happy chemistry is high. Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and over 20 endorphins. The over 20 endorphins are called endorphins which is short for endogenous morphines, because we produce internal morphines. And those chemicals are what make us happy. But the endorphins also manage the immune system. We have an immune system of cells and antibodies and chemistry in every part of our body that fights infections, allergies, inflammation, autoimmune diseases and cancers. If we didn't have an autoimmune system, we'd be dead pretty young. And the one thing you know about people who get serious illnesses early is that their immune system is not strong. And if their immune system is not strong, it's probably because their endorphins that manage the immune system are low. So mental health is very important, not just for the mental health, but also for the physical health. So I hope that the Mental Fix-It app will spread widely, and more people will become more and more aware of any problems they have, and most of us have got problems, as early as possible. But there are other tools. Over a 25-year period, I developed a complete package of 7 tools. The first one is over 100 under-a-minute videos. The second one is mentalhealthvideos.a-to-z.com, which is our website, mentalhealthvideos.a-to-z.com, which is our website that explains everything. The third is the Mental Fix-It app, a method of diagnosis and explanation of treatment. The fourth tool is what you're looking at. It's live streaming. 4 months ago I'd never heard of live streaming, but fortunately I've got a very helpful technical friend who told me about it, and now I do 4 evening sessions and Sunday morning each week, over 6 hours of live streaming, and usually get somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 views for each session, but have got as many as 8,000 views. And that's another very popular way, even more popular than videos, for people to get the information they need. The fifth tool is powder medicines. When you take a tablet or a capsule, it has to go right down your gut and gets absorbed by an indirect route into your general circulation. So it takes half an hour to an hour to start to work, and 1 to 2 hours to become fully effective. But if you drop powder medicine on your tongue and suck it, don't swallow it, so it's absorbed through your tongue, it starts to work in 5 minutes, and it has peak effect in 10 to 15 minutes. Your tongue is pink or red because the blood vessels are so close under the surface, and when you drop tiny granules of powder medicine on your tongue, they get into the circulation very quickly. And if the powder is very nice tasting, within a few weeks you develop taste conditioning. You've probably heard of Pavlov's dog conditioning. Well, taste conditioning starts to work as soon as the powder on your tongue reaches the taste buds at the back of your tongue, even before the powder is absorbed. So you start to get benefit immediately, in seconds. And in mental health and addiction, speed is so important. If you crave tobacco, as soon as you start to crave for a smoke, if you drop the right powder medicine on your tongue, it will reduce your craving, which will allow you to wait longer before you smoke. You'll still smoke, but maybe half an hour later. And you may be able to smoke less. When there's still a quarter of the cigarette left, you stub it out. And tobacco smoking is a very strong addiction. Tobacco kills 7 million people a year in the world, and for every one it kills, there's probably 10 or 20 whose health is impaired. But if you drop the right powder medicine on your tongue every time you want to smoke, and you put off the smoking and you smoke a bit less, that weakens the addiction. Deferring and reducing an addictive substance weakens the addiction. And when the addiction's a bit weaker, it's weaker because your natural chemistry can come back a bit more to normal when there's less of the drug in you, because those drugs completely bend, twist your natural chemistry. But when your natural chemistry has a bit of an opportunity to come back a bit more normal, the craving and the addiction is a bit less. And then the next time you can delay the addictive substance and take a bit less, and your natural chemistry can come back a bit more towards normal. So you just continue delay, decrease, delay, decrease, delay, decrease. And say in the case of tobacco smoking, you can usually reduce your smoking by about a quarter every 2 or 3 weeks. So in 2 to 3 months, you're down to a level where it's the addiction is sufficiently weak that you can quit. And you can carry the powder around in your pocket and take it whenever you're tempted to relapse, because everybody who quits an addiction is tempted to relapse quite often. Some people who